Man, now on any of our social media outlets. Of course, you can listen again on Rainier Avenue Radio. You'll be able to listen once again to this debate and the pre-debate, which is where we are right now on RainierAvenueRadio.world if you're driving or whatever. But if you happen to want to take a look at the candidates and look at what we're doing, you can catch us on our social media platforms. Let me see if I can get this right. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Is that right? All right, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. The Washington State Attorney General debate. This is a statewide position. So this is apparently, we're going to find out here what the job is. The Attorney General of Washington is the Chief Legal Officer of the United States of Washington and head of the Washington State Office of the Attorney General. The Attorney General represents clients of the state and defends the public interest in accordance to state law. Now, that's the official terminology. What we're going to do here today is take the opportunity to get to know the candidates a little bit better. There will be debate following, and then after the debate will be a post-debate conversation. What we want to do is make sure that you become an informed voter. It's your vote. You get to use it however you like. I would say that listen to the candidates, find out where they're coming from, see if they will align with your views, your thoughts, what you would like to see happen, and make a decision based off of that. But it's your vote. And this is our effort as Rainier Avenue Radio to ensure that we assist you with making the decision that you want to make that will be beneficial to you. If you're tuning in and you're unfamiliar with Rainier Avenue Radio, we unashamedly represent South Seattle. Hence the name Rainier Avenue Radio. We amplify the voices of our community. We broadcast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have over 80, that's right, 80, over 80 members of our community who host shows on our radio station. We broadcast talk shows. Some of them are critical issue shows about things that are happening in our community, in the region, in the state, in the country, and around the world. We also have talk shows that are funny. Well, at least the hosts think they're funny, but they get to do it. The whole point is to amplify the voices of our community. Of course, we broadcast music shows as well, music of all kinds. Particular Jazz in the Cabinets by Big Poppy, a great show. The legendary Ness Rodriguez does KUOW Night Beat, and D Money, who's behind the production board right now, comes on the air, turns into D Money. Right now we call him Daniel. Hosts a show called Fresh Juice, an incredible show that does interviews, plays the latest hip hop. Yeah, you want to definitely check that out. And there's a whole lot more. We have a Spanish language broadcast as well that plays music in Spanish, and Rainier Avenue Radio. What else do? We broadcast high school sports. Football right now is where we're at. We'll be broadcasting, I guess, on the 27th. I think it's Garfield and Ballard. Is that right, D-Money? Yeah, Garfield and Ballard on the 27th. Then we do basketball, we do baseball. We'll be also doing some of the other sports as well. But wait, there's more. We broadcast in multiple languages. If you're unfamiliar with South Seattle, word is that we are the most diverse community in the country. Over 70 languages that are spoken, 100 different dialects. And so, of course, we represent our community. You're going to hear broadcasts in Tagalog, broadcasts in Fijian, broadcasts in Spanish, broadcasts in Mandarin, and a whole lot more. And yes, of course, we have youth-focused programming as well, programming hosted by Youth for Youth. We don't edit it. It is their voice and their time to say what they feel is important to them. So again, we are Rainier Avenue Radio. I am your host, Tony B. We've got the Washington State Attorney General debate coming up for you at 7 o'clock. We're doing our pre-debate right now. The candidates, Nick Brown and Pete Serrano, and the moderators are Hana Kim, Laurel Demkovich, Shauna Sowersby, and Libby Denkmann. So we've got 4 moderators today. I don't know how that's going to work. Again, if you don't know, now you know. We have open, honest, frank conversation. We want to get the candidates to talk about themselves, give you the opportunity to find out a little bit more. And I'd like to welcome right now one of the candidates, Mr. Nick Brown. Mr. Brown, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to be here.
Well, first of all, thank you for running for office. I wouldn't do it. It is important, though, and it
Absolutely.
is a lot to do. And so for everyone who's running for office, I congratulate them. It's something that we need to have. We want to take some time to get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
Share some information with our. Why are you running for Washington State Attorney General?
Well, you know, I've been a public sector lawyer most of my career and started my career in the Army, worked for the Department of Justice, had an opportunity to go work down in Olympia and serve as Governor Inslee's general counsel, as his lawyer. And for me, when I got down to Olympia, I just recognized that most of the things that I thought about and cared about in my own life, you know, taxes, public safety, transportation, the quality of my kids' schools, all the things that we worry about just as residents of this state, that most of those decisions are being made at a state and local level and not in Washington, D.C. And I saw what the impact was of having good public servants in those positions. And the work of the Attorney General really matters. I mean, you talked about some of the high-level responsibilities, but I fundamentally believe it's our job to be the advocate for the people and defend people's rights and make government work better. And I've always found it the most rewarding and the most important. And we've got big challenges in the state. I love Washington. It's my home. And I'm excited about trying to be the lawyer for the people and continue to do good advocacy on their behalf.
Where are you from?
I grew up in Pierce County. My father was stationed down at Fort Lewis at JBLM most of his career, so I was born in the Bay and then moved up here when I was 2 and have called Washington home since. So I grew up in Steilacoom, Washington, which is right outside of Fort Lewis, and was there from 2 years old almost all the way through the high school. And then I left to go off to college and law school and the Army, and then came back here and have been back in Seattle resident since then.
What is it that you like about Washington?
There's a lot. You know, I mean, I've lived here since I was 2. Mm-hmm. I lived in Germany for a couple years. My father was in the military. Mm-hmm. And I left here to go to Morehouse College in Atlanta and then law school at Harvard. And then I traveled all around the world when I was in the Army. But I always was drawn to come back. It's naturally a beautiful place. I think we've got good values of community, of diversity. I think we've got big dreams here. I like it. It's, you know, it's a place where I think you can feel in touch with the community. It doesn't feel overwhelming like living in New York or LA. I feel like I can get really in touch with the community. And I think there's good people here. And I've been proud to be a Washingtonian and raise my kids here and call this place home.
What are your hobbies, things that you do, your interests when you're not attorneying?
Well, you know, these days between running the campaign, mm-hmm. I still work because I got to pay my bills and take care of my kids. Mm-hmm. And then I have 2 young children who mm-hmm. are off in the back here. And so much of my free time is just consumed by them. And so right now we're kids soccer season. Both my kids are in scouts and we do that. I try to spend as much time outside as possible and go run and be in nature, see my friends, relax when I can. But these days I don't have too many hobbies because mm-hmm. life is busy with the campaign.
Again, Nick, I want to give our listeners an opportunity to feel like they can make an educated decision, so I'm going to get in your Kool-Aid a little bit.
Go for it.
Do you consider Washington a liberal state?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in my idea of what liberal is, certainly, and I have sometimes struggled with how we define things because your idea of liberal may not be the same as mine. You know, I think this is probably, as a state, has a lot of different types of views. And, mm-hmm. you know, one of the things about being a statewide candidate is that you spend time all across the state. Mm-hmm. Yesterday we were in Spokane doing a debate out there and talking to voters out there. That's a different city, a different culture, a different history. You spend a lot of times in small towns, and there's a lot of different viewpoints on politics, on policy, on community. But for the most part, I think Washington should take a lot of pride in leaning into things that I think are often under the liberal umbrella. You know, this is a state where we respect people, no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, no matter who you love, no matter how you identify. That's certainly not true in other parts of the country, and I think that that's something to be proud of. We're a state that has welcomed immigrants and undocumented people. You know, we have a long legacy of welcoming people from other places. I think that strengthens us. I think it makes us a better community. But you know, again, definitions can be a little bit tricky and dangerous, but I think of it as a liberal and an inclusive state.
Okay, well, let's just be a little more specific.
Sure.
Bob Ferguson, who's running for governor, in my opinion, you seem to have aligned with him, and dozens of times he, let's just say, disagreed with some of the policies of former President Trump. Do you think that it is important that the Attorney General and the governor are aligned in their political, whatever you want to call it, beliefs or
viewpoints? And well, let me say a few different things, because there's a lot in that answer or that question. Then let me just unpack it a little bit. First, I have a lot of respect for what A.G. Ferguson and his team have done over the last 12 years. You know, there are things that they have accomplished in this state that I certainly support and agree with. You know, he created a civil rights division that didn't exist before. He created an environmental enforcement division that didn't exist before. I think he's been an aggressive advocate for consumer protection laws and protecting people. But Bob and I are different people. We are totally different personalities with totally different backgrounds. You know, my background has been mostly in the criminal justice space. That's not his background. Anyone who knows Bob or knows me will know we're very different people. But we share a lot of the same ideas about how to move Washington forward. But I'm going to be my own person and my own type of leader, and I undoubtedly will do things different than Bob. And I don't think you have to be a Democrat or a liberal to have recognized all of the bad policy and illegal actions that were coming from the Trump administration. And you know, so often things get castigated as political decisions or whatnot. You know, we as a state, we were the first state in the country to sue the Trump administration when the Trump Muslim ban came out and banned people or attempted to ban people based on their religion and how they identified. You know, we fought that and we won successfully. I don't think that's a democratic idea. I think that's a justice idea. I think that's a fairness idea. And so, you know, I know a lot of people think of that as a Democrat versus Republican issue. I fundamentally don't. But, you know, in terms of moving forward, it'll be my job as the Attorney General to work with state government, no matter if it's Governor Ferguson or Governor Reichert. It's my job to advise them and make sure that they're getting the best legal services that all state government is. But we also have a separately elected Attorney General for a reason, is because we have this independent authority, constitutional obligation to be an advocate for the people of Washington, to advance things like consumer protection, like environmental protection, like defending civil rights. And that'll happen regardless of who is in the governor's office and what their perspectives are. I certainly think it'll be easier if my priorities and my views align with another Democrat, because I'm a proud Democrat. But if they don't align, my job remains the same. I'm not going to change my own ideas, my own goals, my own obligations under the law.
Well, one of the things that folks are concerned about is abortion.
Absolutely.
And potentially, the way Washington has been in the past, you know, has been pretty old. Folks having to cross that border,
yeah,
come to the state of Washington. Folks having to not be in charge of what they would like to do with their bodies, which leads to a number of different potential outcomes. Where would you fall in protecting the rights, or do you think that is a protection of rights of women to decide what they want to do with their own bodies? And maybe if someone comes here and there are penalties in other states, if this is going to be a state-by-state thing, we don't know, we don't understand, we don't get it. But as a state attorney general, share your thoughts on how people would be treated in those instances, because this is a confusing issue, but it's a real issue for people, and people want to know. And as the lead, you know, I don't want to say top cop, but you know what I'm saying.
Sure. You know, I think it's important to step back for a moment and recognize that for 5 decades in America, abortion was a constitutional right, a right instilled by Roe v. Wade. And that right had been upheld for decades against challenges. That all changed when President Trump appointed some very conservative justices to the United States Supreme Court, and they passed the Dobbs decision, which removed that right. And since that time, we've seen, I think, 24 states all across the country restrict or eliminate the right to abortion in America, having devastating health effects on women across the United States. Now in Washington, we've had enshrined in state law some fantastic protections guaranteeing the right to abortion for people who want that service here in Washington. And I think we should be very proud of that. But just because we've had good state laws here, we don't want to ignore the fact that we've seen impacts because of the change on the federal side. So we're seeing now, as you indicate, people coming to Washington because they no longer have a right to an abortion like they did pre the Dobbs decision. People coming from Idaho, other states around us, impacting our healthcare services. So we've seen requests for abortions in Washington go up, I think, by about 20% in the last couple of years, which is having an impact on us. And I think when people come here, we need to protect their rights, whether they're a Washington resident or whether they've come from somewhere else. So I'm absolutely going to do everything that I can as the Attorney General to make sure we're protecting people's access to services here in Washington. And we also need to be mindful as the national landscape continues to evolve and people have questions about what they're entitled to under the law, that we're doing everything we can to ensure those protections. So, you know, a couple of years ago, A.G. Ferguson and his team filed a lawsuit against Joe Biden's administration to ensure that abortion medication was going to be available for women in Washington, making sure that the mifepristone drug was available. We're seeing constant talk and challenges around fertility drugs and contraception. And so even though Washington's been in a good place, I do fundamentally believe it's Washington's obligation to make sure that we continue to provide those protections moving forward and not rest on where we've been.
Okay, so a part of your job is to protect the rights of the citizens of Washington State. Is that right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that in the state of Washington, whether you're from the state of Washington or whether you come to the state of Washington, you can feel as though the Attorney General will protect you when it comes to things associated with abortion.
If I am Attorney General, absolutely, for certain. You know, and this is one of the areas where I think me and the other person running for Attorney General have some pretty strong disagreements. And so I can make that commitment. I do not think that he can make that commitment, but you'll talk to him soon and you can have that conversation with him.
Yeah, and I'll be asking him basically the same questions
Sure.
and trying to get to know him as well. Something that I think is really important, and as a matter of fact, at Rainier Avenue Radio, we're going to be doing a campaign event. Fentanyl. What are your thoughts? Do you criminalize fentanyl? Just the issue of it itself, the way that it's impacting families, the way that it's impacting our community, and people don't talk about it, at least not in our community, not the way that they...
Not the way we should be talking about it. I mean, it's having devastating health impacts here on Washingtonians, particularly young people. Youth overdose deaths are really, really upsetting, and we need to be treating it like the health crisis, the justice crisis that it is, because of the impact that it's having. And so there are multiple things that I think we need to do. We need to do everything we can to stop the drugs from coming into Washington. You know, when I was the U.S. Attorney for Western Washington, we went off after people who were importing the drugs here. We need to make sure that we're dealing with some of people's root cause addiction problems and providing services at a local level to deal with that demand issue. But we also just need to continue to amplify this as an issue. And it's not going to take one person or one position. It's going to take all of us collectively working hard on this.
Okay. I want to give you the opportunity for final words here, anything that you want to say to those who are watching and listening right now. Again, Nick Brown, candidate for Washington State Attorney General.
Well, I just appreciate everything you said at the beginning about how important it is to vote, to participate, to make your voice heard. The AG's race is incredibly important, so I encourage people to participate. I encourage people to support our campaign, and I ask for people's vote in the election in just about 50 days.
All right. Yeah. Well, good luck.
Thank you, Tony.
In the debate.
Appreciate it.
All right. We're going to have Pete Serrano coming up here. Again, you're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. It's me, Tony B. This is our Washington State Attorney General pre-debate show, just giving you an opportunity to find out a little bit more about the candidates, see the candidate. Do you even know who's running? Don't worry about it. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're here, to give you a little insight into making your vote your personal selection your personal choice. Do we have candidate Serrano?
I'm coming. I'm getting there. I got my Pasco guy coming. Right on.
Pete!
We looking at each other or the camera?
How you doing, sir?
Good. How you doing?
All right. Good to see you.
Likewise.
We did have a chance to talk a little bit earlier.
We did.
I enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise.
Again, you know what we want to do here. We're going to give people a chance to know you. First, why are you running for Washington State Attorney General?
Yeah, I see a need for change. You know, it doesn't matter where you live. You see the same pervasive problems. You see drugs, you see homelessness, you see mental issues, and the government is not solving those issues. And of course, those have a secondary effect of crime and public safety. The Attorney General has so much opportunity. Even though he's hyper-focused on civil issues, he has a great amount of resources that he can deploy with prosecutors, with sheriffs, and with defense attorneys, criminal defense attorneys, where he can help those people make sure that folks get the right to a speedy trial. So that's what I look at when I say Washington needs a change now, and that will come through Pete Serrano.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from Auburn, California, which is right outside of Sacramento.
Okay.
And I've been in Pasco for 9 years. And the craziest part of that is out of those 9 years, 7 I've been on city council. And so I jumped into my community. I taught at Washington State University. They have a Richland campus where I was able to teach environmental issues there. Worked at the Department of Energy and Energy Northwest, where they produce nuclear, solar, and wind and hydropower, and jumped right into my community. And I've been embraced and accepted by them, and I am a leader of that community. So I'm excited. I'm excited to bring Pasco up to Olympia.
What do you like about the state of Washington?
There's so many great things. I mean, when you drive up here, you've got the skyline, you've got the Space Needle, you've got the stadiums. You know, if you drive up from over from either Thurston or Pierce County, you've got Rainier in the background. You drive up from my side of the state, you're likely coming up and hitting the pass. You've got the opportunity to go snowboarding, which my kids and I, when we have time, like to do. Down in Tri-Cities, I get to golf most of the year, again, when I have time. So there's so much opportunity. This is a fertile land of opportunity. Unfortunately, I think our current administration has really kind of disassembled that opportunity, and I'm here to pick it back up and fix it.
What are your hobbies? Stuff do you like to do that, you know, when you're not mayoring?
Yeah, you know,
Pasco.
yeah. I mean, one, obviously, I like to be involved in my community. My wife, again, when we first moved up here, she jumped into the dance community. She teaches dance, so I love to watch my kids doing that. I love to play baseball. I played slow pitch softball till I got several injuries. I tore an Achilles tendon playing basketball. So that's kind of out, but my 11-year-old's a big-time softball player. I really love supporting my family, my kids in their athletic endeavors primarily. And then, you know, like I said, when I get a chance, I golf. I love to snowboard when I can. And I really like to get out, hike, get to know kind of the scenery.
The previous Attorney General who's running for governor right now, I'm just going to say had some issues with the Trump administration. How important is it, or is it not important at all, for the Attorney General to be aligned with the governor of the state of Washington? We don't know who that's going to be yet. You tell me how you feel about that, whatever those strengths or weaknesses are, either way.
Yeah, you know, I'll say I think it's unfortunate that the Attorney General is a partisan position. The rule of law is intentionally, when you look at Lady Justice, she's blindfolded, right? That means that someone intended to take that sense away so that she perceives what she hears, what's presented to her, and she accepts that. It's not about her perception. And I think the Attorney General should be focused on making sure that it's impartial. So regardless of whether there's an alignment with the governor, or some sort of disagreement with the governor, the job is to really disseminate the facts, the evidence, and the law. And that's what the Attorney General should be hyper-focused on. And I'll be honest, you know, you talk about misalignment. I don't think that's where we see our current administration. And I come in here with the intent to be as impartial as possible, as transparent as possible, and bringing the Constitution to the forefront of the analysis of the office.
In general, do you think Washington is conservative state, liberal state? Your thoughts? Your
I mean, I guess you know, if you're talking about an aggregate, it's probably more liberal than conservative, but I'll be honest, as I've traveled the counties of the state, I think, each individual county is different. I would say there are more conservative counties on a general population, but obviously the aggregate of the population resides in 3, 4, 5 counties, and I do think several of those, not all of them, kind of either swing or tend to be liberal. But I look, Washington is and was a come-as-you-are state. I will note that I think it's changing. There's a lot of voices out there that kind of maybe do away with that individuality, and I want to bring that back to the forefront. I listened to Nirvana in high school, right? And that was the song, and it was based on that sign in Aberdeen. And I want that come as you are to be the motto of the state. We'll accept you. If you need help, we'll give it to you. If you're able to bootstrap yourself, we'll help you bootstrap yourself. If you can make it on your own, come as you are and be as you are.
Well, again, your job is to protect the citizens of this state. Would you be a supporter, and it's kind of a broad question, but I'm going to be specific about it, and again, you're mixed a little bit right here. Would you support some of the policies that previous Attorney General Ferguson did not support, the Muslim ban? What are your thoughts on abortion? And this is something very important to a lot of women in this state and women who might come to this state.
Yeah, so I guess if you want me to answer those in turn, I don't think we should be banning anyone based on either their appearance, their religion, their gender, their identity. We shouldn't be banning anyone. Now, if there are folks that are on, for example, a terror list, we should probably not have unsafe people coming into our country and our state. That's strong and distinct from the notion of an all-out Muslim ban. So again, whether it's letting the Green River Killer back out, I don't want that guy in general population. I don't want him out in the public. So it doesn't matter who you are. If you're unsafe, you should be removed and either go back to prison, which may be his instance if he is let out. But we want to promote a safe Washington. I want to promote that. So when it comes to an all-out ban based on some sort of characteristic, that's patently unconstitutional. So I would not support that. As to abortion, that's a settled law. In 1970, the people of Washington brought a referendum, which is the people's voice, because abortion had been criminalized previously. And they said, hey, we want to decriminalize this, which is what they in fact did. And then 21 years later, in 1991, the legislature actually codified it and protected it. So it's not the Attorney General's job to speak for the people, aside from representing their interests. But it's not Pete Serrano's job to say, hey, I agree with this or I disagree with this. The people have spoken. Until they speak again or the legislature speaks again, the abortion question is settled.
So again, people may come from other states. Would your job be to protect their rights to abortion in the state of Washington?
I think that's a bit of a struggle, because if you have a state that prohibits certain things, then there's an opportunity for that individual to challenge the state's rules and regulations. I don't think it's the state of Washington's to say, hey, we disagree with how the state runs itself. I wouldn't want that, whether it's for abortion or, Bob Ferguson's prohibited certain firearms. Why can't they go to Idaho and purchase those and bring them back? He's prohibited that. He's made that illegal. And similarly, he wouldn't defend me if I went to Idaho, procured something entirely legal, and then brought it back to Washington. It's not our job to tell Idaho how to run itself.
And I want to just give you the opportunity to ask the same. Just a big issue for us is fentanyl.
Yeah.
Destroying families, destroying, in particular, young people, teens. Is putting people in jail the answer? I know you're going to say there's the cartels and stopping things from coming in, but just your thoughts in general on fentanyl, whether that be about the drug itself or about treatment or care or putting folks in jail.
So I appreciate you laying it out that way, because there are two distinct issues here. There are the cartels, and I'm going to leave those aside because it sounds like you're talking about individuals who are either facing drug abuse or some sort of mental or other substance abuse, right? And so we need to lead with empathy, and part of that empathy could be placing them in a jail. Part of that would be a treatment facility. And so, it's not like you just lock someone up and leave them be and put them in, a cell and say, hey, good luck, have your withdrawals, hopefully you're here tomorrow. Again, leading with empathy is giving them the tools and the resources to recover. Obviously, if those individuals cannot recover on their own, I do think certainly placing them in somewhere like a jail is a great opportunity. There are diversion programs, but what I hear from judges consistently is they're abused, and they're misused. For example, if an individual takes a treatment bed based out of Puyallup or Federal Way, they could go then get picked up in, say, Seattle or Pasco on the same charges. They're already consuming that bed, but they're not using it, right? And so now they're taking a bed in Pasco and a bed in Puyallup. Now, we need these folks to actually be held accountable. Accountability is key. I think whether any type of abusive situation, whether that's domestic abuse, making sure that that abuser's stayed away. Similarly, we want folks to stay away from drugs that might, they're hooked on. And so I would think that treatment's got to be part of the solution. Jail's part of the solution. Alternative mechanisms. In Pasco, we're working on setting up a treatment facility. I think it's kind of like in design stages. We have a 24-hour detox overnight, but that's just the one step. You really need a true treatment facility with mental health professionals, with drug professionals, and other physiological professionals on site. And I'm excited to see that come to fruition in Pasco in the next year and a half. I want to come down, come check it out.
Okay. I want to give you an opportunity to talk to our listeners, those who are watching right now. Whatever you want to say. Make the case for you getting their vote, whatever you want to do.
Sure, I appreciate that. So folks, you've caught me. I'm Pete Serrano, and I'm here to make sure that your voice is heard. And that's going to be heard throughout the legislature. That's going to be heard by the governor. That's going to be heard by the United States President, Congress, and Senate. I'm here to make sure that your rights are represented equally and adequately. And I look forward to representing you in a fair, kind, and loving manner. And I'm Pete Serrano. My experience, you'll hear this throughout the debate, my experience as the mayor of one of the fastest growing cities in Washington, tackling issues like homelessness, lack of housing inventory, and other crises, energy crisis we're seeing, it all leads me to being the right guy for the right job at the right time, and that time is now. So I really appreciate your support, and I will support you once elected.
Pete, pleasure meeting you. Thank you for running for office.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. Spent a lot of time with our candidates. We're going to get some of our moderators on right now. And maybe not spend as much time, but there are some differences in these two candidates. During debate, maybe that will come to light. Post-debate, we'll definitely talk about that as well. This, again, was just an opportunity for you to get to hear from the candidates. Maybe you've never heard from them directly before. Maybe you didn't even really know who they are. That's why we do this on Rainier Avenue Radio World. I want to say a special shout out to our partner Converge Media, and then also again the Seattle City Club for giving us the opportunity to do this. And again, the benefit of this is for you. And how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Who am I speaking with right now?
I'm Laurel Demkovich, a
Laurel.
reporter at the Washington State Standard.
Oh, good to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
So I'm sure that you're familiar with our candidates.
Yes.
I see some striking differences in what are you going, when you're deciding the questions that you're going to ask, because the moderators play a key role. We just watched the presidential election where whether you believe or whether you don't, but the moderators came to the forefront, at least as far. How are you going to, what are you looking to bring out of these candidates so that the listeners, the viewers, the watchers can make an informed decision that aligns with their beliefs?
Yeah, I think, having covered this race for a couple months now, there are a lot of things that I've heard from both of the candidates. So I think one of the things I was looking for is, asking them questions that I haven't heard them speak on topics that I haven't necessarily heard. Both of them are really, or talk a lot about public safety and the fentanyl crisis and, some of these themes that we're seeing, they talk about a lot, but I think there are some questions that you might see on topics that they haven't necessarily been as open or willing to talk about. So I think that's kind of the main thing, at least that I brought to this.
Okay, and now I'm probably in your mix a little bit. do you think that it is your job to represent the community of folks out there who need this information? Because you said, well, I'm going to ask some questions that maybe they haven't been asked for. Is that just your personal thing, or which I'm not saying that's not good or that's not bad, but the audience is depending on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we are asking about the topics that I just mentioned, but I think, you know, filling an hour and only having candidates be able to speak for 45 seconds, you're going to get to a lot of questions. So I think kind of when we get down into the hour, there's, you know, some of those topics that I think, you know, haven't been addressed yet, but might still be important to inform someone's vote out there.
What about the opportunity for a candidate to say, hey, wait a minute, I want to speak. You know, I just heard something. How are you going to handle that? Because you only get 45 seconds, like you said.
Yeah.
And if someone feels like they're misrepresented and they want to, what are you going to do? How are you going to
Yeah, I mean,
that?
I think it'll depend probably on what, you know, what specifically they want to talk about. If the other candidate maybe said something about them, you know, we want to give them a chance, in theory, to respond. And yeah, I mean, I will not be kind of the main moderator on this, kind of keeping the time and kind of making those decisions, but I think that's probably what she'll be thinking about.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I want you to tell our listeners right now what they can expect when you have the microphone and you're asking questions of the candidates.
Yeah, I think you can expect, hopefully, some informed and interesting questions that will get some answers from candidates that can help inform your vote. All
right. Well, thank you for doing what you're doing. It's an important role.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. You too.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Again, we'll have another moderator come up, and this is, again, just an opportunity, because it's important that you meet the moderators too, you know, and find out where their head is at, where they're coming from, what they're doing, what their thoughts are, and is it important that these questions represent you? Maybe you want to find out some information that you haven't heard before. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. And you are?
I'm Shauna Sowersby.
Hey,
I work for Cascade PBS.
All right. Again, why did you agree to moderate this debate? Why does the state attorney general, a very important position? We have candidates, in my opinion, that are kind of on different sides of the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why did you decide to moderate this debate?
You know, this is my first panel that I've ever done in public like this. So I don't know, really I was just kind of doing it for the experience. You know, I feel like I need to come out of my comfort zone a little bit, and I'm very curious to see what the candidates have to say as well.
Okay. Now, again, we have open, honest, frank conversation here. When you say you're doing for the experience, that makes me wonder, you know, because for me, the benefit of the moderator should be to the folks who are listening.
Sure.
But, you know, your experience may be something that other people say, well, I can identify with this. I can, you know, so when I question you on that and say, well, for your experience, how do you assure those people who are listening right now that when you have the microphone, you're going to be trying to get the information that's going to help them be more informed voters?
Yeah, I feel very comfortable with the Attorney General's race. I've been reporting quite a bit on it. You know, I have talked to both candidates several times. And so, you know, I think just kind of refining some of those questions that I've asked them before, you know, and I already know the answers to those. I want to come out and ask and show the public what some of their ideas are instead of just writing about it. Actually let them tell in their own words what they're doing.
You get a little more time than I do, but then you only have 45 seconds for them to respond. And this is the last question I'm asking you. Let me give you, but again, maybe I'm being a little redundant about this. How are you going to be able to, and can you even do it in 45 seconds, draw out some of the differences? Or is that important to you that the audience finds out, hey, these guys are different? And that's just my opinion. You know what I'm saying? That there are I see some significant differences in this very important opinion about protecting the rights of the folks of the state of Washington.
Right. I think 45 seconds is at least enough to kind of give folks, you know, a good idea of where they have, you know, where the candidates' ideas are, where they stand on a particular issue. maybe it won't be the most, thorough answer, but I think at least it leads people in the right direction. If they want to find out more about that person, then they
And
can
where do you stand on follow-up questions? Because you do get to do that.
Yes, we do.
That takes up time, but where do you stand on follow-up questions? And what are you going to do, and what are you going to allow? And if they're constantly going, I want to respond to that. It's hard to decide when enough is enough.
Yeah, I think when they start to get a little redundant and start hitting the same points, then maybe, we don't need as many sort of follow-up questions. Follow-ups are, I think are kind of more important, just clarifying questions, just really pulling out their answer and making it more targeted as opposed to, talking very broadly.
Well, thank you for doing this. Whatever you'd like to say to our Rainier Avenue Radio audience that's listening right now, which is going to be our core audience, but then again, we saw from last night a lot of different people tuning in to check this out, and ultimately at the end of the day, hopefully become more informed voters and use their vote.
Yes. I would just like to say that I hope tonight makes it more clear for you folks out there who are still undecided, and I hope that maybe you'll hear an idea in there or two that really resonates with you.
All right, Shauna, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, of course.
Woo! We're moving right along. Are we good? Do we have another moderator here?
Oh, sorry.
All right.
yeah.
Once again, you're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. It's me, Tony B. This is the Washington State Attorney General pre-debate show. Coming up at 8 o'clock will be the debate. And then afterwards, we're going to have the post-debate and find out, what people thought about the debate and maybe, how the candidates perform. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm Libby.
Libby! Good
Nice
to meet
you.
Yeah, all right. Well, you kind of know how this works, right? Why did you choose, again, for me, this is a very important, candidacy that these two candidates are running for. And again, this is just my opinion. They're potentially very different. Now, they're supposed to protect the citizens of the state of Washington. Do you know what that means? That could look a lot of different ways. Why did you choose, because ultimately you had a choice, to moderate this debate?
Well, I was invited by City Club, and they said, which candidates, which races are you most interested in? And so I looked at, they were talking about doing city council, doing a governor's debate, that ended up falling through, but and doing an attorney general's debate. And I found the attorney general's race to be the most interesting because it is an open seat. We are talking about issues that I don't know if everybody really understands how broad of a job and how important a job the attorney general has. They are representing agencies for the state. They are going to court to, protect Washington laws, protect civil rights in Washington state. I think that the consumer protection type work that the Attorney General does is hugely important. I mean, the last Attorney General went after opioid companies, won hundreds of millions of dollars in settlement. So I thought that the Attorney General's race was the most interesting and kind of gave me the opportunity to dig into it a little bit more, and so that's why I chose to do it.
One of the things that they're talking about in the presidential debate is being the president for the entire country. I asked both of the candidates, is this a liberal state, is this a conservative state? Your job is to protect the rights of the folks in this state. Where do you stand on that particular issue?
On whether we're a liberal or conservative state?
Liberal or conservative, and as the Attorney General, and I'm just talking straight talk for those who are listening right now.
Yeah.
That could have an impact for some people on who's the top cop and what do they believe in, as opposed to what I believe in.
Well, and it's interesting to have, somebody, Mayor of Pasco, who's from the eastern side of the state, somebody who's based on the West, who was a U.S. attorney, and it does
appointed by Biden.
Appointed by Biden, thank you. And it does seem to be like a real clash of the political bases in the state, right? And, our state, of course, goes blue in the presidential races. We haven't elected a statewide Republican in a little bit, and haven't elected a governor that's a Democrat or a Republican in 40 years. So I think it's clear that the state is, leans to the left. It's a pretty blue state. But one thing I find really interesting is the way that Washington can serve as a bellwether, according to some people, for the presidential race. And when they look at Washington as a bellwether, what they do, these really, smart people who crunch the numbers in politics, is they remove Tacoma, Seattle, and Bellingham from the numbers, and they just look at the suburbs and at the east side of the state. And what they find is without the west side big cities, we actually act like a Midwestern swing state. And so when you do think about the whole of the state, who are you going to represent? Obviously, I think it's undeniable that Washington leans to the left. But Pete Serrano, a candidate like him, he is speaking to a lot of people in the state, and the kind of issues that he brings up do speak to a lot of people in the state. So I want to make sure that tonight we do get a chance to get into those issues.
All right, Libby, you're going to be asking the questions. I'd like you to talk to our audience right now. Whatever you want to share with them, whether it be what they can look for when you have the microphone, whatever it is that you want to say to our audience right now. The floor is yours, Libby.
I hope you enjoy. I hope that we get to some important issues, and I hope that there's a lot of conversation between the candidates, because I do think that when candidates are able to respond to each other, exchange ideas, that's when we get some of the best and most interesting differentials that voters can use to make their choices.
You get to do some follow-up, so is that something that you're going to do?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. In fact, I should be looking at, I think I'm going to get, I should probably get going just to be able to get up there. I'm not used to doing television, so we have to get set. But yeah, I definitely want to do follow-ups and everything like that. And thank you so much.
Thank you,
Libby.
Libby.
Such a pleasure.
Okay,
Yeah.
my pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for joining us. The debate will be starting shortly. You've had a chance to listen to the candidates, a little longer extended conversation with the candidates, and you've also had an opportunity to listen to the moderators. You're going to hear the debate. You're going to have an opportunity to hear from the candidates. You've heard from the moderators. What are you looking for in a Washington State Attorney General? Now, again, this is a person whose job is to protect your rights. Have you thought about that? Now, that is something that, depending on who this Attorney General is, may look different. What you have to do is you have to say, who aligns with my thoughts? You don't have to, but this is an opportunity to do that, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to impact you. It's going to impact your family. It's going to impact your neighbors. It's going to impact your community. And I guess we're going to find out what all this means. We'll be back for the post-debate afterwards as well. And so we're going to talk to the candidates again and find out, well, how did you feel about your performance? What did you think about the questions that were asked? And if there are questions that were asked that we feel like we need to do some follow-up on with each candidate, we'll do a little bit of that too. So make sure after the debate, come right back here, join us, and we'll do a brief post-debate conversation with the candidates. At the very least, we may have some moderators on and try and get some feedback from them about what they thought. Yes, I'll be getting in their mix, and trying to get some answers for you. That's why we are here. We're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio World. It is me, your host, Tony B. We got another debate coming up as well. I think it's the 26th of September from Edmonds Center for the Arts, I believe it is, and that is OSPI, the Officer Superintendent of Public Instruction, and we'll have that debate coming up for you. But tonight, it is the Washington State Attorney General debate, getting started here in about 10 minutes or so. This is a really important candidacy, this position for Washington State Attorney General. You heard I brought up abortion. with both candidates. What did you think about what Nick Brown said? What did you think about what Pete Serrano said? How do you think that this should be broached by the moderators? How far should they go? How far should they push? What do you think will be the right answer that you feel will protect your rights as an individual? I did bring up fentanyl as well. Maybe you are aware, maybe you're not aware of the damage that fentanyl is doing here. And this is not just an easy silver bullet type of situation that we're dealing here. I mentioned the cartels, but this is impacting families, individuals, and in particular, youth in our community. What should be done? Should they be considered to be drug addicts and locked up? You know, these individuals might be the same ones who addicted, might rob you, might break into your home. I understand that, I get that. Should they be criminalized for something that is addictive? Should they be given treatment? I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you think? That's what this is all about. That's what we have elections for, so that you can utilize your vote to make a decision that's best for you. We had a Seattle City Council Position 8 debate last night. Again, I think these are critical because we're talking about your community. This is a statewide election, Washington State Attorney General. And so these issues, again, will affect you and impact you. What about people who come from other states? You know, we live next to Idaho. Different ideologies, philosophies. What about when folks come from Idaho because, you know what, I'm going to come to Washington, and you heard candidate Serrano say that, well, wait a minute now, protecting the rights of people from other states, that may cause a conflict. You heard, and that might be something that, you know, for you is, well, that makes sense to me. You heard candidate Brown say, if you're here, your state of Washington, we're going to protect you. So both of these candidates, in my opinion, are very, very different and have very different viewpoints on what's best for the state of Washington. But at the end of the day, they're supposed to protect your rights. Laws can change. Laws can be brought up. And the Attorney General has the opportunity to say, you know what? I disagree with this for the state of Washington. That's where we're at. Again, you're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This was our pre-debate show. I want to say thanks again to our candidates, Nick Brown and Pete Serrano, for running for office and then joining us here. And again, to our moderators who joined us and shared a little time about what their thoughts are. And the moderators, if you remember from if you watched the earlier debates, the moderators played a role, whether they chose to fact check or whether they didn't choose to fact check, whether follow-up questions were allowed. You know, in the first debate, the mics were off, so the candidates couldn't really be heard if they were talking. In the second debate, the mics were on, and if a candidate had something else to say, they spoke up. Now, whether those moderators allowed it to continue or not, you know, had an impact on ultimately what you got to hear. What's going to happen tonight? Whew. Man, we're about 6 minutes away. We're going to find out. And then afterwards, once again, we'll have the post-debate show here. We'll talk to the candidates, find out how they felt about what I'm calling their performance. We'll have some follow-up questions on some of the answers that were given. And ultimately, at the end of the day, again, this is all for you. This is to help you be an informed voter. So here's the deal. What you can do is you can email us at rainieravenueradio.world@gmail.com. rainieravenueradio.world@gmail.com. KUOW.com. If there's a question that you want answered, watching the debate and you didn't hear it answered in the way that you wanted to, send us an email and I'll drill down on them a little bit about your question and see if we can get an answer. It's hard to do that in 45 seconds, but we'll see what happens. You know, there is the opportunity for follow-up, but they're on a schedule as well, just like we were on a schedule, you know, and so I kind of had to rush through the moderators here a little bit because they had to get upstairs. I did spend a little extra time with the candidates intentionally because that's who you want to hear from, but you've got an hour starting at 7 o'clock for the moderators to take control of the microphone, and we'll see what comes out of that. Okay. Well, we're going to make our way upstairs to take a listen to the debate. Maybe some folks are going to stay down here. I don't know. Matt, are you staying down here again? And Daniel, you staying down here? Dre, you staying down here? Z, where's Z at? Right here. Z, are you staying down here, Z? I'm at my head. This is the amazing crew I just named that are doing all the critical things to bring these pre-debate show, post-debate show, and even the simulcast. Daniel, I talked to Daniel, simulcast to you of the debate. So big shout out to them as well. Once again, a big shout out to Converge Media, our partner in this, and of course, Seattle City Club. We're going to take you to the debate, which will be happening very shortly. You can stay right here on Rainier Avenue Radio and see the simulcast, watch, listen to simulcast, and then when the post-debate show starts, you'll already be here. So I encourage you to do that. That's it. We'll be back shortly after the debate with the post-debate, whatever it turns out to be.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not helping bad girls set up their websites, I'm listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Mga kaibigan, ito po si Kuya Bert Kawili.
And this is Miles Salvador from Australia.
And I'm Norb Kawili, also known as Norbcam.
Kung gusto niyo po ang latest news and events from the Philippines at yung local Filipino community, PhilAm Radio po.
We play Filipino music and interview guests from all around the world.
And I'll keep you updated on the latest Seahawks and sports news.
Kaya always tune in PhilAm Radio every Tuesday, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Pacific Time on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
And in YouTube and Facebook. Salamat po.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not deep frying a turducken in a closed garage, I'm listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world.
You know you can't get enough of Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Rainier Avenue Radio presents All Music, All Day Saturday. Music, All Day Saturday.
This is Edwin Bailey, Bulldog Blue.
Jazz from the Cabinets.
That's right. It's time once again for Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy.
Star Time.
Thanks for tuning in. My name is Paul Pearson.
This is Star Time. Saturdays, all music, all day. Reggae Hour. K-Fox Night.
Looking for the perfect beat? Yeah, it's the beat of the Fox.
Fresh Juice. D-Money in the group.
Myself, D-Money. Nice Ice Patron.
Taylor Hart.
Resistencia. The Northwest Rap Game.
DJ Medina. Chad Cheddar. Northwest Rap Game.
Sergio LaCour's Love Line.
It's Sergio's Love Lines with Sergio LaCour. Go into the phone line. Tell her who we talking.
Sea Monster Radio. Mo Jams is your jam.
We're live. Welcome to Mo Jam Mondays. This is KZ of KZ Music Media. Caller Goddess for Mo Jam Mondays.
Just my opinion. God is inspiration. Music. All day and all night. Saturdays on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Citizens of America or citizens of the world, let us begin.
Rainier Avenue Radio.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Rainier Avenue Radio.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not being reprimanded by traffic cops, I'm listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Welcome to the coronavirus pandemic.
I'll take coronavirus for 100.
Fever, chills, shortness of breath, loss of taste or smell.
Where to stay at home and isolate.
Correct. coronavirus for 200. Inability to stay awake, persistent pain or pressure in chest, trouble breathing. What is seek immediate help? Correct!
Coronavirus for 500.
Crippling and potentially dead infectious disease eliminated the United States with vaccination.
What is the polio vaccine?
Correct!
I'll take coronavirus for 700.
The Daily Double! Should I take the coronavirus vaccine?
Wait. Hold up. This is not a game. It's time for serious discussions. We have coronavirus vaccines, but not everyone is comfortable taking them. Here's the facts. Based on what has been proven about vaccines for other diseases, COVID-19 vaccine may help keep you from getting seriously ill, even if you do get the virus. Getting vaccinated also may protect people around, particularly those at greater risk for severe illness from COVID-19. We don't yet have all of the answers. Get informed, talk to your healthcare physician, and make the right decision for you. This is a message supported by the Washington State Department of Health.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
You are listening to
Rainier Avenue Radio,
your community radio station.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time, and when I'm not rehearsing my annual address to shareholders, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Welcome to the Fitness Corner. I'm your host, Mark Bryant, and you're going to get a whole total body workout on my show, starting off with a warm-up, aerobics, strength training, cool down, and stretching every Friday from 11:30 to 12 right here on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Welcome to the debate between candidates for Washington Attorney General. Coming to you live from the Broadway Performance Hall at Seattle Central College on Capitol Hill. Brought to you by Seattle City Club and the Washington State Debate Coalition. With special thanks to presenting sponsors AARP of Washington and Comcast. And appreciation of our event and venue sponsors, our civic sponsors, and premier media partners. With production support from WV Livestream.
Hello and good evening. I'm Hana Kim with Fox 13 Seattle. Joining me tonight for this important debate, we've got Libby Denkmann here with KUOW, Shauna Sowersby, Cascade PBS, and Laurel Demkovich with the Washington State Standard. And of course, our two candidates for Attorney General, Nick Brown Pete Serrano. Thank you both for being here and taking the time. We'll be asking a lot of questions, but as far as the rules are concerned, very simple. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. They will have 45 seconds to answer initial questions. We will lead a moderated discussion with 20 seconds for rebuttals or follow-up questions. And each candidate will end with 60-second closing statements. We have asked our live audience to remain respectfully silent from here on out. No cheers or boos. You can follow at home using the hashtag WAElects. We tossed a coin backstage to determine who would make the first opening statement. Nick Brown, you won that coin toss and you have elected to go first. You have 60 seconds, Mr. Brown.
Well, thank you to the Washington State Debate Coalition, the Seattle City Club, Seattle Central College for hosting us, and thank you, Pete, for being here as well. The race for Attorney General is incredibly important for Washington families, Washington businesses, and all of our communities. And I'm excited about taking on that immense responsibility. People that know me know that I'm here because my parents always taught me to care about my community, to give a damn about what happens. And they're veterans and public servants. And I took that foundation with me all throughout my career. And all throughout my life, I've tried to keep people safe and use the law as a tool for justice. When I started my career in the Army, when I worked for the Department of Justice, when I worked down in Olympia on complex law and policy issues, and when I served as the United States Attorney for Western Washington, the chief federal law enforcement officer for this district, I've kept those values with me the entire time. There are clear contrasts in this race in terms of experience, readiness to lead, and values, but I look forward to the debate tonight, and thank you again.
Thank you for hosting us. Nick, thanks for being here. Seattle City Club, thank you for the opportunity. AARP, Comcast, thank you for sponsoring this. And of course, Seattle Central College, thank you for hosting us in this beautiful building. I'm Mayor Pete Serrano, and I take that title seriously. I was elected to City Council in Pasco after being there only 2 years. because of the leadership I showed in the community, because I care about the community. We've got a diverse body of people who reside in Pasco, and we've got a myriad of needs that have been met over the 7 years I've been a council member and now a mayor. I was elected in 2017, then re-elected in 2021, then elected by my peers as mayor because they knew that coming out of COVID, they needed leadership, and that leadership resided in Pete Serrano. We've battled homelessness, opioid crises, we've battled addiction issues, and I will talk about how we've overcome and achieved those and made sure there's adequate housing for our people in Pasco, and you'll hear about my leadership.
Let's dive right into your office priorities. Mr. Brown, if elected, what would you want to accomplish in the first year in office?
Well, I fundamentally believe the principal obligation is to be the lawyer for the people of the state of Washington, to work hard to keep them safe, to defend their rights, and to advocate on their behalf no matter what the challenges are. The secondary responsibility is being the lawyers for the state of Washington to make sure the state government is working its best as can. And my job is to build the best professional law firm that we can on behalf of the people to make sure that they are serving the public as best they can. And we have big challenges about keeping people safe, about dealing with some root cause problems that are making this a less safe place to live, about dealing with some of the inequities that we have in this state. But I know that with my experience and background as a leader, as a lawyer, that I will bring those values to bear on behalf of the people of the state of Washington.
Mr. Serrano?
And thank you. The first priority is getting to know the office. There are 13 geographic offices throughout the state. That means you have 13 diverse set of opinions, people that are going to report to me as Attorney General. I'm going to need to understand what their background is and how they're serving the people of Washington and whether they're serving the people of Washington. If they're floundering, if they're failing the people of Washington, that's where leadership comes in. And that's where I need to stand up and say, hey, look, our priorities, transparency, open government, and providing the people the protection they're right, and making sure that, that the state of Washington is a safe and an accommodating place to live. That's what we need to start with. That's what I'll lead with.
Thank you both for that. I want to switch gears to public safety, specifically youth violence. Teen violence is at unprecedented levels, with kids as young as 13 years old committing crimes like armed robberies and carjackings. The AG's office does not have direct responsibility, of course, going after these cases. However, as AG, you can advise state agencies and influence priorities. If you were the AG, would you address this issue of teen violence? And if so, in what way? Mr. Serrano.
Yeah, Ms. Kim, thank you for citing that instance, those two instances that occurred last night in Federal Way with 13-year-olds bumping a car, running into a car, and then carjacking it. We absolutely need to teach our kids. We need to discipline them. Part of that disciplinary action will come from the schools, it'll come from the parents, it'll come from home, but it needs to come from the state as well. If we're not enforcing the rule of law, there's no way we can make Washington State safe. As I've walked around, I've talked to folks on the street. I came here 3 hours early for that specific purpose. Consistently heard, I'm concerned about the folks that are homeless and the safety issues. And that trickles down to the children and adults. And the Attorney General has the opportunity to work with local law enforcement and federal agents to make this place safe.
I do have a follow-up to that, Mr. Serrano. I know you said that you have to hold, accountability and you need to discipline kids. Is there specific things that you would do as AG, though? Is it a task force? Is it legislative action? What would you specifically do to address this issue?
One of the first things I do is work with the King County Council and make sure that detention centers are not shut down. I'd want to make sure that there is space for the children so that they can actually come in and have the opportunity to recover and be rehabilitated. If we can't lead with compassion, if we can't teach them, we're just going to keep them locked up, and that gets nobody anywhere.
Well, I don't know if you're going to get a whole lot of agreement tonight between Pete and I, but I would agree that the top priority is to keep Washingtonians safe, and that translates down to our youth as well. And all across the state, not just in King County, we're seeing youth violence at very concerning levels. What I will do is bring my experience to bear, and I've spent most of the last 22 years as a lawyer, as a leader, working on public safety matters. I've literally prosecuted hundreds of cases of drug crimes, guns crimes, people taking advantage of other people, protecting children in court. I know what it's like to lead complex investigations, to do this work, and we have to be focused on our youth. I do think the AG's office should be a resource for local jurisdictions to make sure that we can address any backfill or challenges they have. We can be a resource better for the legislatures to make sure they're drafting policy that addresses some of these problems that we're facing. And we also have to recognize that children are different than adults. The standards and discipline and actions we take for our children should not be the same for adults who have better brain capacity to recognize the crimes that they're committing.
When you say resources, could you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You said in the beginning of your question that the AG's office does not have very much direct criminal jurisdiction, but we can help local jurisdictions deal with these issues at their request. And so I want to make sure that jurisdictions all across Washington understand that we will have expertise and assistance if they request it from the Attorney General's office or if the governor's office requests it, and make sure that we're partnering with them in that proactive way.
When it comes to sexually violent predators, the AG does have direct responsibilities here. So in the AG's office right now, do you think that they are keeping the public safe from high-risk predators? And if not, what is one change you would make in managing this population of high-risk predators? Mr. Brown.
No, I absolutely think that we have a very important responsibility to deal with this serious problem. And I have done that in my career. I have prosecuted sexually violent predators. I have prosecuted people who have abused children. I know what it's like to stand in court and hold the hand of a victim who's terrified of her accuser, who's been charged with a crime. So I'm going to bring that experience and make sure that we lean into this. The thing that I think we need to do moving forward is to make sure that division has the proper resources. And I know that the need can vacillate over time, but I want to make sure that we add more resources to that, more prosecutors to that division, to make sure we're expediting some of the appeals and the decisions that are happening, and to continue to be a resource to local jurisdiction. But I think to do that well, you have to have done it before. And that's what I'll bring, is that experience doing it before.
Yeah, one of the opportunities we're going to have as the next Attorney General is that of working with local jurisdictions. When I've talked with my local prosecutors, both in Benton, Franklin, and even up in Kittitas County, I've heard consistently this message. We've asked for assistance from the Attorney General's office, and unless it's aligned with Bob Ferguson's priorities, we're not getting that assistance. For me, it doesn't matter what the priority is. It's safety for the public of Washington. It's safety for all Washingtonians, regardless of your race, your color, your creed, or your identity. It's making sure that these people have the resources. And the Attorney General's office has the opportunity to provide those resources. And one thing that we're reading about the current Attorney General's office, they're largely ignoring what they're seeing from experts on the McNeil Island, and they're not treating these individuals properly. We need to get them treatment.
I want to go to public safety in general. Mr. Serrano, you posted a video online walking on 3rd Avenue in downtown Seattle saying the city is in the midst of confusion, chaos, and decay. With the city of Seattle trying and failing for many years to clean up places like 3rd Avenue, is it realistic to believe an attorney general could make any meaningful difference in this area? If so, how would you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll harken back to my time as a city council member and mayor of Pasco. I've led with compassion and I've led with a loud voice. The ability to speak and to have people hear you, the ability to use the power of whether it's the mayoral position or whether it's the attorney general's position, to go down and say, we're going to work with you. We're going to hold you, City of Seattle, accountable. We're going to hold you, King County, accountable. We want to make sure that this is safe, not only for our residents, but for tourists who come in and coming out. Talking with folks in the tourist industries, they're very concerned about people getting on and off cruise ships. We need to use the power of the pulpit to speak and stand for the people of Washington. That's the most meaningful way to make change.
Mr. Brown, when you were the U.S. Attorney of Western Washington, part of your job was going after big-time drug dealers. In 2023, you told KNKX Radio that tougher prosecution wasn't the answer. Just this week, you said again you believed in the least amount of prison time necessary to meet public safety. The word necessary is subjective in this case, so elaborate on the factors you used to determine what a necessary sentence was for drug convictions.
No, absolutely. And all throughout my career, I've done this work. I did it when I was in the Army, when I prosecuted people and represented people in court. I did it for 6 years as an assistant United States attorney here in Western Washington. I did it as the chief federal law enforcement officer. With that comes deep and rich experience, analyzing cases, working with the law enforcement community, working with the victims who are impacted by these crimes. And I know that when we advise people about how to perceive justice and safety, that no two cases are alike. And so we have to look at each individual case and say, does this make us safer? And so what I would tell my team is, you figure out, based on your expertise, the advice from your leadership, the viewpoint of law enforcement and victims, what do we think is necessary to hold this person accountable? And then we go in and ask for what is necessary. To me, that is justice. That is how we achieve justice and safety.
Just a 20 follow-up question there. What do you say to the people when they hear the least amount of prison time necessary, that you're too soft on crime? What would you respond to that?
Well, I don't get caught up in catchphrases like soft on crime. I get caught up in what works and what results look like. And that comes with deep experience. And so I have prosecuted hundreds of cases. I have stood in court and advocated for lengthy sentences of decades at times. I've also advocated for justice and leniency where it's appropriate, because we have to recognize that there is not a cookie cutter slogan that makes us safer, but there's actual perspective and wisdom that comes with trying these cases for many, many years.
We want to move on to the issue of prosecutions of law enforcement officers. Last year, the Attorney General's office charged 3 Tacoma police officers in the death of Manny Ellis. It was the first time the AG's office had done that. A jury found the officers not guilty. As Attorney General, how would you decide to pursue use of force cases against law enforcement officers? And explain your reasoning. Mr. Serrano first.
Thank you. In looking at that issue, I've talked with law enforcement officers who have expressed to me the issue of the Attorney General's office policy on use of force. They've told me it's muddy, it's unclear, it's not quite followable, it's not understandable. The Attorney General has an obligation, if he's going to prosecute those officers, to give them a very clear, objective standard, no subjectiveness. And that becomes very difficult because you're talking about split-second decision-making. What we need is making sure these individuals understand their standard, and that may come with rewriting the policy. That may come with working with outside consultants. That may come with working with legal industry experts. I don't know that the AG's office is the right place to house that, but at least it's a place to start with experts who have real measurable experience in the field.
Mr. Brown.
You know, to achieve that goal of safety, we have to have trust and accountability for law enforcement. We have to have trust that the public knows that law enforcement is acting in their best interest. And so I would analyze those cases like every other single case that I've analyzed. Was a law broken? Can we bring a charge? Do we have evidence to sustain that? It's not a matter of an AG policy. It's whether Washington state law was violated or not. And so I will look very closely at other alleged uses of forces by law enforcement and bring decades of experience of analysis to bear on that work. And we will decide, was this unlawful by this law enforcement officer? Do we have the evidence to prove that crime? Can we convince a jury that this is the right charge to bring? And if so, we will charge that person. And if not, we will not. But we don't want to guess about what we will do. We want to rely on someone who's actually done that work before, and that is the experience that I have.
Mr. Serrano, I think you were anticipating my question there, but a bill introduced in Olympia earlier this year would have created a unit within the Attorney General's office to pursue charges against police for deadly use of force. That bill did not pass, but it could be revived. This question goes to Mr. Brown first. Would you support that bill, and do you believe the Attorney General's office is the right place for such an office?
Well, I'll revert as a start back to what I just said, that the way you make the community safer is when you have more confidence and faith and trust in law enforcement. And I think the idea of having an independent office of review within the Attorney General's office will help achieve that goal. We'll obviously have to see what the policy looks like if it's reintroduced this next session. We'll have to see what the stakeholder input would be. But I do not see why it would live in any other jurisdiction in state government. There's been talk in the past about the governor's office or some new agency creating it. There is expertise and wisdom in the AG's office to handle that responsibility if the legislature entrusts us with it. And I know, having worked with the men and women in the Attorney General's office over many years, I know that they have the experience and professionalism to do that job well. And if the legislature passes that bill, I'd welcome that opportunity.
Mr. Serrano.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's the right place to house that for several reasons. One, as we've heard, much of what the Attorney General's much of what the Attorney General's work is civil work, not primarily criminal. I don't know that the expertise resides there. I do know this. Down in Eastern Washington, where I reside, in talking to local law enforcement, they have special investigative units. That means if Benton County has a crime, Kittitas County, Walla Walla County, other folks who actually have lived experience on the streets, interacting with individuals, having been trained. The Attorney General's office is trained to be lawyers, not to be secondhand cops. And I think that's a big concern about housing that unit within the AG's office.
I think there's some confusion, though, because the bill that you're talking about is an Office of Independent Prosecution. We already have in state law an Office of Independent Investigation that does some of the work of investigating offenses. What we're talking about is prosecuting offenses, alleged crimes, and the bill that has been contemplated over the last couple of sessions is to create that Office of Independent Prosecution, which requires lawyers. And there are good quality prosecutors that have done this work, decades of experience from other county offices that work for the state. And if the state passes that bill, I think we should entrust them to do that work.
Let's move on.
I want to switch to Washington's drug possession laws. After years of debating laws surrounding drug possession, the legislature last year approved an overhaul of the state's drug laws, making possession a gross misdemeanor while providing some expanded substance use treatment to those who need it. Mr. Serrano, we'll start with you. Do you support Washington's current drug laws? And if not, what changes might you ask lawmakers to pursue?
Yeah, when I've looked at those laws, I look at what we've done in the city of Pasco. Primarily what we've done is make sure that it's going to dovetail into two things. There have been recent Supreme Court cases that have helped us ensure that folks aren't continually loitering or sitting and staying. So the city of Pasco has adopted these ordinances to move folks along. One of these issues is related to drug possession. What we can't have is a drug possession law where we don't focus on, you've mentioned treatment, but I've talked with different judges, and they tell me that an individual gets charged in their court and then has possession issues in another county and takes a bed, but never uses that bed in court A and never uses the bed in court B. We need to hold these folks accountable throughout the system and make sure they're actually seeking treatment. That's one of the things I'd want to make sure we're doing, is actually making sure they're following the treatment pattern prescribed through the judicial process.
Mr. Brown.
Yes, I think the legislature ultimately ended in the right place. And these are difficult decisions to make for a legislative body to find the right balance between accountability and treatment. But I was happy that the legislature found a solution after much debate about it. I do think we need to keep our focus on the people that are most culpable for some of the drug problems that we're seeing here in this state. And we're seeing a real fentanyl crisis in particular here in Washington. And fentanyl cases was the #1 type of case that my office did when I was the United States Attorney because of the immense damage that it's doing to our communities. But I want to make sure that we're focusing our resources first and foremost on the people bringing drugs into our community, principally Mexican-based drug cartels up and down the I-5 corridor. But we're never going to solve the problem with just that alone. We need to make sure that we're also getting to people's root addictions and providing the treatment and services for them as well.
I do want to follow up quickly, and we'll start with you, Mr. Brown. You mentioned fentanyl. Without having a direct lawmaking or even criminal prosecution ability, what is the Attorney General's role in combating the fentanyl crisis?
Well, there's a lot of work that needs to happen working with our local jurisdictions, as we've already talked about. You know, if they have a resource need from the AG's office, we should try to provide that with our internal lawyers and teams as well. We need to make sure we're advising the legislature to craft policy that is easy to understand, not only for the law enforcement community, but for the general community as well, and to be an advocate around this. You know, and I looked back at what AG Rob McKenna did, the AG.
That's time, sorry.
Sure.
Mr. Serrano, 20 seconds.
Yeah, one of the most important things, as Nick already said, is you can partner with local jurisdictions. I've seen the investment that we've made in Pasco make it safer. We've seen folks who consume fentanyl, folks who move fentanyl through our community. It's been very clear that moving fentanyl through our community is not welcome here. We're going to prosecute it as best as possible. The AG can work on that.
We're going to move on to gun control. In April, a judge struck down Washington State's ban on high-capacity magazines. The issue is expected to be decided by the state Supreme Court this fall. Starting with you, Mr. Serrano, how would you handle this case if you were Attorney General?
Yeah, obviously that's the case that I'm currently working on. I'm representing the individuals who were alleged to have sold high-capacity magazines. So I'm going to have to likely recuse myself from that one. I think that's going to be a bit difficult, having been on the inside of the other side of that one. But the reality is we need to make sure that each individual, when I look at our communities, they're getting torn apart by these drugs. They're getting torn apart by violence. When I look at the large capacity magazines and the assault weapons bans, we had a lot of the impacted communities who are coming to the gun shops looking for safety and protection. We cannot ban protection in Washington. That does not work.
Mr. Brown?
Firearm violence in Washington and indeed America might be one of the most pressing problems that we have. Not only crimes that are committed by firearms, but suicide deaths, which is actually the leading cause of firearm deaths in Washington state. And this is an area where Pete and I could not disagree with more. He has spent much of his career trying to undermine gun safety laws here in Washington state, passed by the people, passed by the legislature. He is advocating for more guns, for more dangerous guns. He is advocating for more ammunition in our community. He even supports not regulating ghost guns, which don't have serial numbers on them, which the law enforcement community almost universally has expressed disapproval for because they're so dangerous, because they're very, very difficult to trace. I do not believe that is the answer. I believe as a state, we need to continue to advance gun safety measures here in Washington because that has results and saves lives.
And I'll hop in here because we did see Nick take one extra 20-second earlier. I'll just simply note that I've continually advocated for individual rights, for the ability for the individual to protect him or herself, whether it's individuals who are suffering from domestic violence, folks who are just walking out on the street. You can't walk out on the street and always feel safe, especially as we move up and down the state. So I've been advocating to make sure those folks have the ability to protect themselves.
And a quick 20-second follow-up for both of you. I'll start with you, Mr. Brown. Would you push for any additional gun safety measures at the state level if elected?
I think we constantly need to try to advance things that work and save lives. You know, in Washington, we were one of the few states in the country to reduce suicide deaths, in part because of our gun safety laws. And so I will constantly work with the legislature to see if there's new policies that is data-driven, that has results, that is constitutional, that will keep us safer. I just don't believe more guns and more dangerous guns on our streets is the answer.
Mr. Serrano?
Yeah, one of the issues that we're seeing is just the violation of individual rights. What we need to do is make sure that the legislature is understanding what its limitations are, what the Constitution says, what the United States and the Washington State Supreme Court have said. Those are the things that should drive these bills. They will drive safety, and we need to make sure that our children are protected from themselves even.
Mr. Serrano, this year the AG's office announced a first-of-its-kind hate crime hotline set to start next July. The pilot project will take calls from people in King, Spokane, and Clark counties. A member of our audience submitted this question, asking if you will continue the pilot project, and if so, why or why not?
Yeah, I think if we're going to have the pilot project, I think it's great to target those few counties. But again, hate crimes exist everywhere. Every community has a marginalized community. Every community needs to have a voice. I'm a little concerned if we're going to do a pilot program, we're just cherry picking 3 counties. I understand they're 3 of the largest counties, but what about Franklin County, where I reside? Hate crimes exist there too. Do those people not get protection? So if we're going to continue it, let's expand it to all of Washington, and let's figure out what the right size is. Let's make sure that we're vetting these calls. Let's make sure we're providing the adequate resources, and where there are punitive measures that need to be taken, let's take those. Where there are healing measures, let's give those to the folks that are subjected to these issues.
Mr. Brown?
Absolutely, because Washington State has had some of the highest hate crimes in America per capita. You know, we think of Washington as an inclusive and welcoming state, but for many years we've been in the top 10s of hate crimes. Crimes against people because of their identity, their gender, who they love, their religion. This is a huge problem. When I was the U.S. Attorney, I was the chair of the Civil Rights Subcommittee for all of the United States attorneys in the country, and taking on hate crimes was one of the big priorities of our office. And I think that expanding the program that we've developed is going to be a big priority. The reason it's been limited to a few counties thus far is because, as you described it, it's a pilot program. This is how pilot programs develop. You don't simply put it in every county. But I think we're seeing really encouraging opportunity with that program to make sure that people have another chance to interact with their government to address some of the really big problems that we're facing.
We're going to move on to the issue of reproductive health care access. Washington law protects abortion access. And last year, the Attorney General of Washington State sued the FDA over rules reducing access to the abortion drug mifepristone. More challenges could come through the courts or a future presidential administration. Mr. Serrano, would you go to court to protect Washington residents' access to mifepristone?
When it comes to abortion access, this has been a settled question since 1970. It was done through the voice of the people, through a referendum. The Washington Constitution allows you to express your voice to your legislature on 3 occasions. That's a recall of an officer, that's through the referendum, and that's through the initiative process. I find that those are three of the most sacred processes protected by our Constitution, and granted, we are very unique in having those. So there's no reason that I would go and undo what's been done for 50 years. And so my opportunity to protect the individual rights, unless the legislature speaks, unless the people speaks, that's my job, is to protect what's protected.
So just to be clear, is that a yes or a no on whether you would go to court if there was a threat to access to mifepristone?
I intend to go to court on that.
You would go to court for that. Mr. Brown.
Well, that's the first time that he said that he would have sued the federal government to protect that access. And I applaud you for taking that stand consistent with what A.G. Ferguson said. I would agree with Pete that we have some of the best laws protecting abortion access here in America, but I would disagree that it's a settled question because, as you note, the law constantly evolves, and the changes that we've seen on the federal government level are impacting people here in Washington. We've seen almost 24 states have changed their laws to restrict or deny abortion access in America. Many of those women are now coming to Washington. We've seen healthcare systems here have an extreme increase in the need for healthcare services, 20% more abortion requests here in Washington state in just the last couple of years. And we need to make sure that we're advancing the ball on these protections, not just simply relying on the laws that were passed in the 70s.
20-second follow-up. Washington currently has a shield law protecting patients seeking abortions from out of state against criminal investigations. Mr. Brown, do you think it is Washington's job to protect patients from other states from local prosecution?
We need to protect people within our state, whether they are lifelong residents here, whether they're tourists who are coming here, whether they're coming here for healthcare services that they are obligated to get, that they have a right to have. And just because the state of Idaho has changed their abortion laws, I'm not going to stop protecting women who come here for the healthcare that they need and deserve.
Mr. Serrano.
Yeah, I really struggle with that one. We have 50 several states that have the ability to legislate as they see fit. The notion that we would try to undo legislation from another state, I think that puts us in a really strong predicament. And why wouldn't those states seek to undo all of our laws? I cannot stand for that.
Mr. Serrano, in recent years, the legislature has debated a bill that would give the Attorney General's office the power to block or oversee hospital mergers. Is this a proposal you agree with? Why or why not?
I appreciate that question. Healthcare is one of the most important things that are at the issue of this debate. We've heard it several times, time and time again. The opportunity for the Attorney General to oversee mergers is one of the critical elements of the Consumer Protection Act. However, when I see this, I'm very concerned about what happens to Connell, what happens to some of the smaller folks up in the San Juan Islands, where they may need consolidated health care. Why should that reside in the Attorney General's office to oversee that transaction? I'm very concerned that this will have significant detrimental impacts to our rural areas, and so I have concerns with this bill.
Mr. Brown.
I think the Keep Your Care Act was a really important step to get to one of the most fundamental issues that we're facing here in Washington, and that is healthcare issues. And we are seeing real negative impacts on some of the consolidation efforts and proposals. We're seeing that impact manifest because we're seeing consolidation driven by religious-based hospital associations that are denying services like abortion, like access for transgender care, and a host of other areas that they don't want to do. We're also seeing healthcare deserts get created where consolidation happens and you live in a small community and you can no longer access the healthcare that you need. And so there's an opportunity to provide oversight and transparency. And one of the best parts of that bill, I think, is the opportunity for the public to know more about what may happen to their healthcare opportunities in their community. And I welcome that responsibility in the AG's office.
One of the Attorney General's core responsibilities is enforcing Washington's Consumer Protection Act. Over the last 10 years, more than $2 billion has been returned to consumers through this legal action. Mr. Brown, if elected, what aspects of consumer protection will your office prioritize?
Well, I think it's really important that you highlight that because the Attorney General's office is one of the few aspects of government that actually returns money to the public. And we've seen some very important aggressive litigation, not only from AG Ferguson, but from AG McKenna and AG Gregoire. You know, I was an intern with AG Gregoire way before I went to law school, and she was coming on the cusp of the very important tobacco litigation, which Washington State led. And I think we should always be looking for opportunities to lead, to protect individuals from fraud, from misrepresentation, from companies that are trying to take advantage of them. One of the areas I'm most excited about pursuing next is around housing. No matter where I go in the state, people are very concerned about housing. And as we see more consolidation in the housing market, I want to make sure that consumers' rights are protected so housing can be easier to get and more affordable and accessible.
Mr. Serrano?
Thank you. One of the sponsors is AARP, so I'm going to throw that out there. Our elderly folks need protections. I mean, half the time I feel like I can barely operate my computer, my social media, and I'm always getting spam. I'm always getting these emails. Our elderly folks, especially when it comes to computer-based fraud, are going to need assistance. The Attorney General's office really needs to step up the game and make sure that it's got the ability to enforce those fraudulent activities. I had a friend who told me about his parents who had a high-pressure sales, started online, and it would have bankrupted them. I will give AG Ferguson the kudos he deserves and his team for saving those folks.
Mr. Serrano, I want to follow up on your point about fraud. I'm just wondering specifically if you can share some of your ideas for how you might protect Washington residents against fraud, especially as you mentioned, where there's an increasing number of scams and online crimes.
Yeah,
You'll have 20 seconds.
Sure. I think as we work with the legislature on penalizing cyber crimes, that would be certainly one opportunity. Working with folks in the IT space, again, I barely use my computer half the time. I'm not the guy that's a tech expert, but I think there are folks that are smarter than me that have the ability to say, hey, here's how we track fraudulent activity and here's how you can follow it.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, what are some of your ideas? You'll have 20 seconds.
Well, housing is the first priority for me, to use the Consumer Protection Act to get at a very serious problem. But it's important that the next Attorney General actually have experience leading investigations in this work. I've prosecuted fraud cases. I've led multi-jurisdiction fraud cases. When the housing market crashed in 2008, 2009, I did multiple cases dealing with mortgage fraud. And that's the type of experience that I think we need in the Attorney General's office.
Attorney General Bob Ferguson's office is suing to block the proposed merger of Kroger and Albertsons. The Federal Trade Commission is pursuing its own case. A number of states have signed on to that. Mr. Serrano, if you were the Attorney General, how would you approach a similar major merger? When does it make sense for the state to get involved versus relying on a federal agency?
Yeah, the state needs to be looking out for the residents. That's whether it's crime, public safety, transparency, or a merger of conglomerates, whether that's digital communications, whether that's insurance companies, or whether that's healthcare, or whether that's a grocery chain. The Attorney General always needs to look internally to the people of Washington, and if there's some sort of price gouging, price fixing, some sort of increase and lack of benefit that comes from the transaction, that's when the Attorney General needs to act on behalf of the people to protect them. And I look forward to doing that as your next Attorney General, and I look forward to doing that as I've continually sought to protect rights, and I've always sought to make my community better in Pasco by making sure that we look out for our community's benefit.
Mr. Brown.
I'll agree with Pete on this one. I think it's very important that we're finding issues that impact Washingtonians. And whether it's a case like mergers or proposed mergers, my analysis is going to be the same. Is this in the best interest of Washingtonians? Do we have a case to bring? Are we the right avenue to bring it? Sometimes it makes great sense to partner with the federal government or with other states to lead big multi-jurisdictional investigations, particularly when we're seeing issues that impact us nationally. I think about the opioid crisis and how this was a national crisis and the opportunity to partner with other states. And I know that sometimes it's nice to have multiple cases going in multiple jurisdictions. Sometimes that's one of the best ways to get results. And I know with respect to the merger work that is being attacked and addressed now, that is one of the reasons that I think that they brought that suit, because to have multiple avenues of redress and recovery for people, that's sometimes the best way to do it.
The AG's core responsibility, one of the main ones, is to represent state government agencies. Is there a department that you believe is getting overlooked right now by the current AG's office? What is that area that's getting overlooked, and how would you improve that? Mr. Brown, let's start with you.
Well, it's easy to sit from the outside and cherry pick issues that are happening within state government. And I've had the pleasure and the opportunity of serving as a special assistant attorney general on numerous cases. I have tremendous respect and admiration for the men and women that are doing the hard work on behalf of the people and representing state government. But many aspects of our government have big problems. I'm particularly concerned about how we've been processing some of the cases in our mental health system. We've had a big federal litigation, the TrueBud litigation, that's been going on now for many, many years, where people are being denied their competency restoration rights, and we've been held to account by a federal judge. And so my focus is going to be on improving that agency, but all across their states, there's ways we can improve our state government, improve the state provision of legal services, and I don't want to focus on just one.
Yeah, just quick follow-up on that, 20 seconds. How would you improve that, what you just brought up?
Well, we're going to have to come in and analyze what's been the problem thus far. And, having done that sort of review before in my experience, I know that it's not safe or prudent to prejudge what some of the problems are, because I haven't worked directly with some of those cases, but I've seen how important that issue is. And so we're going to bring some new review and analysis and my experience within the Department of Justice to improve those services.
Mr. Serrano.
Yeah, hearkening back to my time at the Department of Energy and Energy Northwest, which is a state agency, both down in at the Hanford site in Richland, I saw some issues that I'd like to address with the Department of Ecology. I struggle with some of the oversight. I struggle with some of the permitting conditions, and I don't mean this, I personally struggled with legally. Some of these issues weren't factually backed. They weren't scientifically backed. Some of the conditions of the permit to regulate nuclear waste. If we want to make Washington safer, we've got to give it the tools to make it safer. And that comes down to making sure that the Attorney General is involved in helping to make sure that permit's regulatorily sound and scientifically sound. That experience in the energy and environmental industry will help us clean Washington and make sure it's safe.
20-second follow-up to that. When you say improvement, what does that mean exactly? Is it more manpower, more staffing, or is there something else?
I think there's going to be a sweet spot between advising. That's what the Attorney General does, right? It advises the agency. But there will also be an opportunity for us to provide resources of expertise, maybe bringing in outside experts to say, hey, look, this permit condition is getting challenged. It's not sound. We need to move on and fix the permit accordingly.
It's impossible to ignore the context of the election, of this election year, with the presidential election and Washington governor election right around the corner. There's a chance this election could result in a governor and attorney general of opposite parties. Mr. Serrano, how would you work across the aisle with a governor of a different party?
I would anticipate that we'd have the same goals. Keep Washington safe, protect the people, make sure our communities are engaged, make sure we have the opportunity to listen to them and respond to their needs according to their needs. I would hope that would be the goal of the governor, regardless of who it is. That's my goal. And I think when that's the goal that sets forth the agency, regardless of who the governor is, we'll find the way to make things right for the people of Washington. I will continually put their interests at the forefront, regardless of who's governor and regardless of who's president.
Mr. Brown.
Washington has experienced this before with a governor and attorney general from different parties, and they found a way to keep the state moving forward. And I look forward to working with whomever the next governor is. And I know what it's going to be like to advise a governor about the legal issues that their state agencies are facing, because I've done that work. I served for 4.5 years as the general counsel for Governor Inslee, worked directly with their legal counsel and various agencies across the board. And I know how much work goes into making those agencies run. The next governor will come in with their own priorities, and it'll be my job to make sure they're getting the best sound legal advice. But we also have separate and independent authority to be the advocate for everyone at home, to make sure that we're exercising everything we can do to keep them safe and advocate to defend their rights. And that's going to be true regardless of who's in the governor's office.
Attorney General Bob Ferguson has sued the federal government a lot, upwards of 100 times. Mr. Brown, how would you defend Washington's laws against challenges from future presidential administrations if necessary?
I'm really proud of the leadership that has happened here in Washington to stand up for Washingtonians. And I remember in 2017 when the Trump Muslim ban came out, the travel ban that discriminated against people based on their faith and where they came from. And Washington was the first state in the country to lead. And I remember what it took to lead that bold and aggressive action to stop an injustice, not only to protect people in Washington, but to change the course of justice for everyone in America. And I will do that same analysis that we did back in 2017. Is this best for Washingtonians? Do we have a case to bring? Are we the right people to bring it? And I have absolute confidence in my ability to lead the men and women of that office. And I also know that the threat we might face from a second Trump presidency is real, and we have to be prepared to defend Washington in January of 2025.
Yeah, I stand ready to protect the people of Washington. That is going to be the most important and critical role. As I've mentioned, it's my time as the mayor of Pasco. I consistently look at my constituents. They may not agree with me. We may have different backgrounds. It's a diverse city, but I'm consistently looking at them and saying, what is it that I can do to make your life better? Regardless of who's there in Washington, D.C., regardless of how the House or the Senate makeup turns out, my job as Attorney General will be to protect Washingtonians against anything, internal or external, including the President of the United States. And that's the guarantee that I make these folks, these people of Washington. I will stand for you.
Okay, I'm going to do a 20-second follow-up to you, Mr. Serrano. How would you defend a Washington law that you personally might not agree with?
Well, there's the defense of the law and what the law says. The bottom line is we have to defend the laws as long as they're constitutional. I've said this all along. I want a group in my agency that reviews the law, reviews Supreme Court analysis, make sure that we're following the Constitution, and that's where we start.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up? If you were to believe that a law was unconstitutional, what would you do in that case?
I would talk to the group. I would have them analyze the law, and we'd come with whatever advice to the agency that we have or the legislature, and we'd want to advise them openly and transparently. It's not about what Pete Serrano thinks. It's about what legal precedents and the Constitution of Washington and the United States say.
Mr. Brown, how would you defend a Washington law that you personally might not agree with?
Pete is not saying what he said multiple times previously, is that he would not, in fact, defend laws that he thought were unconstitutional, that he would tell the legislature and the taxpayers to find outside counsel. He said that repeatedly around gun safety laws that have been passed here in the state of Washington. He has pledged that he won't defend them, that he will instruct the lawyers in the AG's office to find new jobs if they're not willing to do what he says. That is not the type of leadership we need in Olympia.
20-second for rebuttal.
Yeah. The reality is I'm going to advise the legislature according to the laws, and that's where we're going to go with it. The ability to defend the laws is the most critical thing that we have as the Attorney General. I will be there to defend the constitutionality of the laws. If they're unconstitutional, we'll talk about it. We can always, as Nick said, we can hire outside counsel like Pacifica Law Group.
Well, look, Washington's gun laws have been found constitutional thus far. These were passed by the people. These was passed by the legislature. He has pledged repeatedly not to defend those laws. Imagine you hire a lawyer and they tell you that, I'm sorry, you're out of luck because I personally disagree with it. It is our obligation as the Attorney General to defend the laws of the state of Washington. And that's what I will do as the Attorney General.
I want to move on to pushing legislation. The Attorney General has historically been involved in pushing for new laws. Mr. Brown, how active would you be in this space, and how much would you assert your own views?
I think there's a real unique opportunity for the Attorney General, like any other statewide officer, to look if there's policy improvements that we can have. We've seen that under Attorney General Ferguson. We've seen that under Attorney General Rob McKenna and Attorney General Gregoire. You know, looking back, one of the things that I think was a positive development in the policy space by an Attorney General was action taken by AG Rob McKenna when at the time we were facing a real big meth crisis here in Washington. And what he did was organize a task force to bring stakeholders together. He proposed new legislation to deal with the meth crisis that we were facing. And he brought people together, and actually the meth problem went down for a whole host of reasons. But I think that was a very important piece. I'm going to bring that same analysis to bear, to rely on the expertise of the men and women in the AG's office and see if there's a policy space and advancement that we can make.
Mr. Serrano.
Yeah. One of the things I have struggled with is watching sponsorship by the Attorney General of legislation. To me, it's the legislature's job to carry its duty to create the law, but it should be done so on sound advice from the AG's office. And so there's a partnering, but it's not that we go in and we sponsor. I will note there are opportunities where the AG's office can certainly come in for budgetary requests, other opportunities where it may need resources, where it may need some sort of tweak to the law. I don't have issues with that, but proposing, outright constitutional issues, I struggle with the AG's office being the one to do that. That's the legislature's purview.
Let's move on to worker protections for a second. This is a question from our audience. The audience is asking, how do you plan to ensure that labor laws are enforced effectively to protect workers' rights, particularly in sectors where wage theft, unsafe working conditions, and unfair labor practices are prevalent? Mr. Serrano.
Every day I go to work, I expect a fair wage. Every day I go to work, I expect to work in a safe place. I don't think there's anyone in this audience, and certainly raise your hand if you oppose that. We all expect a fair wage. What the employers agreed to, the employer must be beholden to. We cannot support wage theft. The Attorney General has enforcement authority to go after folks who are not paying proper wages, who are skirting labor laws to make a safe and efficient, I guess not efficient, but a safe working condition. That's part of the Attorney General's purview.
Well, first and foremost, I think we have one of the best and strongest workforces in America, and I'm really proud to call Washington home in part because of that reason. I'm proud to have the endorsement from the Washington State Labor Council, which represents so many hardworking employees in this state. One of my plans moving forward is to create a brand new division in the Attorney General's office, specifically around worker protection issues, to not only address wage theft, which is happening all across the state, but also to address worker safety conditions. And a lot of people aren't familiar with what wage theft is, but we have employees who are not being paid what their law requires of them. And, we think about crime and we think about someone who steals something from a Target, and we all want to hold that person accountable. But we have literally hundreds of millions of wage theft happening in America right now, and we need to bring that same intensity and focus to protecting them as well.
This is a 20-second follow-up question also from the audience. What steps will you take as Attorney General to protect the right of workers to unionize? Mr. Brown.
Well, as I said, I think this is one of the best things about Washington is that we have strong labor protections. The right to unionize in America and in Washington is so foundational. My grandfather was a machinist, and I know that his union membership gave my mother the opportunity to be the first person to go to college. And so I will do everything we can in Washington to protect union rights.
Yeah, that's going to be a critical issue. Obviously, we're seeing issues with Boeing Corporation right now. And it's hypercritical that we ensure that the workforce is supported. Like Nick, my grandfathers were both union members. My father was a union member, my mother too. So I've seen this impact and benefit my life. So I'll do everything I can to work with the legislature to make sure that those unions' abilities are protected.
On the topic of transparency, Attorney General Bob Ferguson's office was fined by a judge for withholding records in a lawsuit last year. And recently, Republicans have accused him of hiding a lawsuit that challenged the certification of signatures for ballot initiatives. I'm going to ask this question to Mr. Serrano first. Do you think transparency in the Attorney General's office can be improved, and how would you do that?
Yeah, I believe it can be improved. A couple of things. One of the things is making sure there's an adequate staff in the Public Records Act department. I know as a Public Records Act requester, things are delayed. There's an arcane process whereby I actually have to pay a check, and then I wait for either a CD-ROM, and I don't know anyone in this audience who actually has a CD-ROM on their computer. I don't. I know I'm not a tech guy, so I might be the outlier. But the reality is, the information needs to get to the public as quickly as possible. And then when I receive my records, I see them hyper-redacted. The question shouldn't be how much can we redact this and protect the information, but how much can we provide to the public while protecting any privileged information? I don't see that currently.
Just a quick follow-up. How would you go about deciding that less information needs to be redacted in a given Public Information Act request, for example?
Well, again, I'll talk to my experience. I've seen documents where all I get is a header and then all black. There's no way, no possible way, everything but the header is attorney-client privilege. I know that. I write memos, I draft briefs, I know that. There's no way all of it can be. So the way to go about deciding it, sit with your group and discuss it, say, how is this protected or not?
Mr. Brown, do you think that there is an issue with transparency in the Attorney General's office? And what would you do if you were elected?
Transparency in government is so foundational, and we have one of the strongest Public Records Act in the country, and I think it provides more trust in government. The more that we explain to the public about the decisions we're making, the more opportunity they have to interface with their leaders, the more opportunity they get to have records from their government. That builds trust and faith in our government, and I will do everything I can to build upon that. You know, when I served as Governor Inslee's counsel, he had made a pledge during his campaign to never exercise the executive privilege, the first governor who had ever taken that stance. And I was proud to make sure that that promise was fulfilled. He was the only governor in history to never use that privilege. I also served on the Public Records Accountability Committee, the Sunshine Committee, for many years, ensuring that more transparency was there. And so I will absolutely look to improve the AG's office's practices, and I know that there's more work to do.
Just curious, 20-second question for both of you. What is a lawsuit that AG Ferguson has pursued that you disagree with, and why? 20 seconds. Mr. Serrano.
As to
a specific lawsuit that he has filed that you disagree with.
Right. Trying to think of the ones that he's filed. I've obviously been on the other side, having filed several against him. Nothing specific comes to mind.
You know, the one thing that I would say is that, and we talked about the Albertsons case thus far, I think that was a really appropriate case. And I don't want to sit out here and just say what I would have done and would not have done, because you're not sitting in that chair to analyze the evidence. But the thing that I wanted to see in that case is to work collaboratively with the federal government to bring that case and move it forward. So I think there's a new opportunity there.
That is, but that doesn't answer my question regarding, you don't have one case that you disagree with Mr. Ferguson.
Well, you know, there's been thousands of cases over the last 12 years that he's brought, and I haven't sat in that corner office to make those decisions. And so I don't want to sit out here and say that that was the right decision or the wrong decision.
Okay. Thank you for those answers. Okay, that is all the time we have. And now it's time for our closing statements. Pete Serrano, you went second during opening statements, so you will go first. During closing, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you for attending tonight. Thank you for your time. I will say a case came to mind, the Value Village case. I won't dwell on that. That's one of the ones I do disagree with. I apologize that it didn't come to mind. I've been elected and reelected as city council and now elected by my peers as mayor because they see the leadership that I bring to the city of Pasco to bring transparency, something that we desperately need out of the AG's office, to bring public safety to forefront, to tackle our energy crisis, work with our producers and our transmitters, Bonneville Power and local agencies. I know what Washington needs. We need someone who's going to fight for us, to bring safe streets. That's why everything I do in Pasco is oriented towards that. That's why when I come out here, you've already mentioned it, I come out and I look at places that need help. Tonight, after this, I assure you, I'll be walking around the streets and asking folks how we can help protect them. And I invite all of you, including Nick, to come with us.
Well, thank you again to the Debate Coalition and the Seattle City Club, and for everyone who showed up in the audience and everyone that's watching at home. I'm so proud and humbled to be standing before you and advocating to be the next Attorney General for the people of the state of Washington. And I know what Washington voters are looking for, someone who has the legal experience, the leadership experience, and the values to move this state forward. And I have tremendous, unique experience that I know will help improve this state. I've served on both sides of the aisle as a criminal lawyer, leading hundreds of cases. I've done complex civil litigation, multiple jury trials. I know what it's like to lead an office because I've done it, having been the United States Attorney for Western Washington. And I've been taking on those leadership responsibilities all throughout my career. And I know my values are where Washington values are. I know that we have to defend our gun safety laws, which Pete won't do. I know we have to defend and advocate for greater abortion protections here in Washington, which Pete won't do. And I know we have to defend Washington from all of the challenges that are happening in other states and from the national government. And I will make sure that I do that on behalf of Washington. And I ask for your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We've come to the end of our evening. Would like to thank our candidates, of course, and my colleagues here on the panel. You could register online or mail until October 28th. Make sure you vote. Election Day is November 5th. Thank you so much for our audience being here. We'll let you break your silence finally to show some appreciation for the candidates. From Seattle Central College, I'm Hana Kim for Fox 13 Seattle. Good night.
Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not busy tearing the roof off the suckers, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not stopping a Mercer Island street brawl, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
We are strong, we are resilient, and we will get through this together. But these are stressful times, and it's important to also practice good self-care. It's normal to feel overwhelmed, anxious, or afraid, but there is hope. Reach out to someone, connect with your friends, stay in touch with your community, and know that you are not alone.
Wash your hands, don't touch your face, wipe things down, clean up your space. When you cough and sneeze, do responsibly. If you feel you're getting ill, isolate at home and chill. No, you're not alone. Please pick up your phone and call 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health Community Radio Station will provide you with more information. Say Rainier Avenue Radio. Your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is the post-debate show. Wow, a lot to talk about. I thought it was a pretty good debate. Again, you have candidates that have different views on some of the issues that were discussed. So we're going to have an opportunity to talk to the candidates, find out how they did in their opinions, get a chance to talk to the moderators again, and really looking forward to that opportunity. You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. It's me, Tony B, and we're going to find out how the candidates felt about, I'm calling it their performance. Again, if you listen to the pre-debate show, we gave you an opportunity to find out some information about the candidates, personally, who they were, and the debate happened. Now we're here. Candidate Serrano is here. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. Well,
thanks for having me back.
Again, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
The easy question.
Yeah.
How did you feel about, I call it performance, maybe it's not performative, but that's what, how did you feel about how you handled yourself?
Yeah, you know, I'm happy with how I handled myself. I harkened back to my experience as the mayor of Pasco. I'm talking about the importance of bringing safety and transparency through the AG's office. I think those are the most critical issues we need to hit. Of course, there are a couple instances like where I kind of drew blank once and wish I wouldn't have done that, but I was able to recall an issue. So, you know, I'm grateful for that ability to recall. So I think I got my message out there.
Do you think that you were able to define for our listeners who you are, what your values are, and how you would represent them as a position of Attorney General of the state of Washington?
I believe I did that. I believe I clearly and accurately articulated that I'm here to listen. I'm here to advise the state, whether it's the agencies or the legislature, on constitutionality of questions and issues that come before them, and to ultimately be that protective layer for the people of Washington. That's really the AG's job, is to look out for Washingtonians' best interests, whether that's from within the state or whether that comes externally from outside of the state.
In my opinion, law evolves. So having said that, one of the reasons I said that, and I want to get this from you because folks may be confused about it. Candidate Brown, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, said that you were undermining restrictive gun laws. What is your, tell me your answer to what he said when he said that. What, is that true? Is it not true? How would you explain that?
Sure, I really appreciate the question because I didn't get the follow-up. So the experience here, the most recent, one of the 2 court cases we have that's ongoing, or 3 in regards to firearms issues, we actually won at the trial court level. It was about the large capacity magazines. That's my organization that we brought this litigation to challenge the constitutionality. The trial court judge deemed that law unconstitutional under federal and state constitutional premises. So to note that I would undermine the law, I think quite frankly, I'm representing the people of Washington more fairly and more accurately than the AG's office is on that matter because the judge did in fact agree with us.
What would you say to folks who are, because this is, you guys are talking about some stuff, man, and I get it, you know, you're running for AG. But when you're talking about state law versus federal law, and states have the right to overrule federal law, or federal law is the mandate. Just what is your feeling on that, just so we can kind of clarify that for people?
So the state has the ability to be more restrictive than the federal law. Perfect example is I've worked for about a decade and a half, decade and a quarter in environmental law. Let's say the Environmental Protection Agency says you can have 5 pieces of dirt for each gallon of water. Now the state can't say you can have 6, 7, 8, whatever number above 5. The state can come back and say you can have 4, you can have 2, you can have 1.5. And so the state can be more restrictive than the federal law, but it's not supposed to be more expansive than the federal law.
Okay, and what I said before, law evolves. In that case, there have been situations where the law has actually changed. What is your thought on that if you were the Attorney General? And I'm asking you that because there are laws and I'm glad that they have changed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. There's no question that there are bad laws on the books. And you need to have innovative and, excited discussions about what the law says, what its intent is, right? If it's intended to be protective, but maybe it's prescriptive or inhibitive of certain individuals or whatever the case might be, we need to look back at that. And this is what I was trying to get to. When a constitutional question comes before the Attorney General's office, when I'm sitting in that office, it's not going to be, what does Pete Serrano think about this question? I was very clear, and maybe I wasn't clear, so I'll repeat it. I want to get a group of like-minded individuals and folks that don't agree with me, and folks in the middle, and have this kind of quasi-cabinet position of these groups who write competing memoranda, write competing issue statements that discuss the law, have invigorating discussions and say, hey, the Constitution says this, but look at these 5 cases. And then someone else says, hey, look at these 7. And then the guy in the middle says, you guys both got me, right? Whatever the case is, we can't be just groupthink. We have to compete, and compete might be the wrong word, challenge each other. And to your point, that's how the law can continue to evolve and how it can change as necessary. The one constant issue right now is the Constitution. There is a way to modify the Constitution. It's a very arduous, difficult process, and it was intentionally done that way by our founders, but it can be changed. And the questions that we have need to be, how does this protect Washingtonians? We're always going to come back to that. Is this beneficial to the people that reside in the state?
You get to kind of be the judge here. How do you think the moderators did? Do you think that the questions that were asked of the both of you were relevant? That people of the state of Washington wanted to hear. You only get 45 seconds. And the other thing is you get the chance to rebut. How do you think the moderators did in handling that situation? You just pointed out that you wanted to rebut. You didn't get the opportunity. How did the moderators do tonight?
Well, I thought they were fair. There was a time where both Nick and I took some extra time, and that's part of the process, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't, necessarily, there was a time also where they kind of called time. And so I thought they did a good job of kind of, directing traffic, if you will. That's what the moderators are there for, to pose questions objectively. I didn't hear them place any subjective or their own opinions in it. I thought they were very fair. And, again, there was a time where each of us ran long intermittently. But, when there's a time to call a hard stop, they called it.
I want to give you the opportunity here to, again, define your position. If you had the opportunity to do that, extended based off of the questions that you were asked tonight, or if those questions weren't asked of you. Again, from my perspective, we have candidates, and there are a lot of things that you guys agreed on too, but there are also some differences. And so for those who are out there trying to make a decision right now, I would like you to say, this is where we differ, this is where I stand, this is why I should be the Attorney General for Washington State.
Yeah, my community of Pasco has trusted me to be its leader now twice as an elected and re-elected city council member. And now my peers have elected me as the mayor to lead that city post-COVID. We've had some very difficult times. I mentioned this earlier in the opening. We've had homelessness, we've had mental health, we've had drugs. We're one of the fastest growing cities, if not the fastest growing city per capita in Washington State. 2022, we were the 7th fastest growing city in the United States. We've dealt with some real issues over the time in my term on council. I've always looked to the safety of the people of Pasco, and I've always looked to be as transparent as possible. When I look at that, that is the most important thing I bring to the office of Attorney General. Being that individual who's always going to look out for you and do so in a transparent manner.
All right, this is my last question of you, because I just want, Candidate Brown, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm going to ask Candidate Brown, said that in an answer to a question, you were answering the question in a different way than you have previously been answering that question. And I think you know what I'm talking about. Is he correct? Have you changed? Or what that leads to is a trust issue about what you say. And I think, I just want to clarify that and give you the opportunity, because that's what he said. He said, this is not how he's been answering these questions.
Yeah, he said that a couple times, and one of the questions was in regards to abortion medication. And I've often not addressed that specific issue, but that specific issue was addressed tonight, and I said, yeah, I defend it. And my opportunity is to defend the people's voice, and that's the voice of the people. I may not agree with it personally. And then he said it in another instance. I quite frankly don't recall it, but I did fundamentally and objectively disagree with that statement. I don't recall what the context of that one was, but I remember when he said it, I was like, that is not accurate.
Yeah. Your opportunity, again, to make your case to those who are listening right now as to why they should vote for you. They have the pre-debate show. They've got this debate to look at. And again, I just want to give you one more opportunity.
Yeah. What I bring to the table is actual elected, not appointed experience. I understand what it is to respond to the voters, to be the individual who's got the voice and the ability and authority to act on behalf of the voters. That's unique to me. That's unique to me as the mayor of the city of Pasco. And I intend to do everything in my power to make sure that your rights are continually protected. Everybody's rights. I want to be clear about that. That's what Pete Serrano stands for.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming down, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right. Rainier Avenue Radio, our post-debate show. I believe we have someone else coming up to talk to us. I think you need to watch this. Some of the questions that I'm asking are directly related to what took place on that debate stage, and I want to make sure that I provide an opportunity for the candidates to address, rebut, whatever it is that they want to do. Some of those statements were made. Looking forward also to talking to the moderators to find out what they thought about this debate. Do we have somebody? Okay. Let's see here. Well, again, at this point, I'm going to thank Pete Serrano for coming on, and you know, it's not an easy thing to say, okay, I'm going to talk about this after I've just talked about it for an hour on a debate stage, but that's why we do this. This is not something that, you know, for me personally, this is for you, the voter. And we'll see if someone else shows up to have this post-debate discussion about what took place at the debate. You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio .world. I'd like to thank our partner, Converge Media. And by the way, Converge is about to have a distribution deal. Well, they've signed a distribution deal with Fox Soul. So you'll be seeing some of the content that Converge creates nationally in stories that emanate right here from our local community. And of course, Seattle City Club for giving us the opportunity to host these pre-debate and post-debate shows. Yeah, I don't know. You know, I mean, I'm just keeping it real. At this point, apparently, maybe because it's late, I don't know. But the candidate Brown, not here. The three moderators who came to speak to us earlier, not here. Maybe someone might show up. I'll wait a little while longer and we'll see. Because I think it's important that after the debate, there's an opportunity for conversation, for folks to explain why they asked the questions that they thought, what they thought of the debate, what they thought of the candidates. And for the candidates to further explain areas where there was a little difference of opinion and enlighten you, the voter, on what their perspective was under those circumstances. So we'll see. You know, I can sit here and keep flapping my gums, but you don't want to hear that. And I'm going to give folks another minute or two, and then I'm going to call it a wrap, and we'll get ready for our next debate. Again, you saw that candidate Serrano came down, and we're trying to get some folks to come down here and have a conversation with us and share what they thought about the debate. We'll see. I'll give them another couple minutes or so. If you're tuning into Rainier Avenue Radio for the first time, we are the community radio station of South Seattle. Now, of course, we amplify the voices of this particular community, but people listen to us from all over the place. You know, a lot of the issues that are inherent in South Seattle aren't just restricted to South Seattle. They're in other communities as well. As a matter of fact, we have found that these issues are also international. So we broadcast in multiple languages. We broadcast in Fijian, we broadcast in Tagalog, we broadcast in Mandarin, we broadcast in Spanish, and one of the shows of our popular shows is Philam Radio, which airs on Tuesdays at, is that 12:30 to 2? 1 to 2, 1 to 2:30. 1 to 2:30. Listen quite heavily worldwide. So, yeah, other opportunities again to listen to Rainier Avenue Radio. We have sports broadcasts. We have critical issues talk shows. We broadcast from our community. we definitely do what we're doing right now, is broadcast from the community. And so, Z, is that it? Yes. All right. Well, there we have it. Candidate Pete Serrano did come down and talk to us and gave us the opportunity to ask him a couple of questions about what took place during the debate. Our moderators have not come down, so I don't know what to say, other than we appreciate you taking the time to come back so that you could hear this information. There's no one here. There's nothing for me to say about it. What did I think of the debate? I thought the moderators did a good job. I thought the candidates did a good job. There were some areas where, again, differences were fairly defined, and I certainly wanted the opportunity to talk to the candidates and get answers from those. I also wanted the opportunity to talk to the moderators and find out what they thought about the performances of the candidates and their answers to the question. Apparently today's not the day for that. Might be because we're a little late, and it is a little late. I don't know. But I'm going to sign off now. Again, thank everyone for tuning in. You got what you got. Thanks to our partner, Converge Media. Also, thanks to Seattle City Club. It's me, Tony B, on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We'll be back on September 26th for the OSPI debate, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. That'll be coming live from the Edmonds Center for the Arts. We'll once again be doing a pre-debate show, then we'll be simulcasting the debate, and then we'll be doing a post-debate show, and hopefully we'll have more attendance at that particular post-debate show than we did. Wonderful attendance last night on the post-debate show. I don't know why. Your guess is as good as mine. That's it. That's all the time I have. That is going to do it for the kid. It's me, Tony B, your host, saying, remember, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you cannot, you're probably right. I'm out. Peace.